I'm Joe Sciortino, Executive Director of the Schmidt Family Foundation. We've been around for 12 years, give out about $40 million a year. We work in this sort of framework where we try to undo the harms of industrial systems and development that they've done to people for millennia. We work in food, energy, and water systems. We try to undo them and replace them with a regenerative form of development that's people-led and communities first, and we try to keep that within the bounds of ecological limits. Our human rights work, which I'm going to talk about today, is our international facing work, and just focus on the three bolded stuff on the right. Our human rights work works on access to energy, trying to create a right to energy in Africa. It works on regenerative food systems, so making sure that that policies benefit farmers and regenerative food systems. And then lastly, we work in the mining sector, making sure that governments are held accountable for regulation on mining. We see three current conditions which have existed, but we think have accelerated recently. There's an intense resource grab in Africa right now that's really been accelerated lately. There's a bunch of power plans that are really just going to benefit the mining sector. It's not going to benefit communities. We've heard a lot about the green revolution for Africa, but again, that's another industrial play. It's not going to be helping local communities. So that's the first condition. Second one is multinationals are getting even more sophisticated and nefarious in their tactics. If you see that little report up top by the Syngenta Foundation, they're trying to promote seed harmonization laws, which really is just going to rob people of food sovereignty. It sounds nice, but it's actually quite evil. And then Monsanto, we can do 50 pechacuchas on Monsanto and what they keep trying to do. Yeah, it's climate change, we got to feed the world, all that stuff that we know is bogus. And then the last condition, which Jaron touched on with Berta, the threat to environmental defenders has really increased. And in 2015, I think we saw over 150 environmental defenders killed in every sector that we work in, agribusiness, mining. So our approach is twofold. The first is we try to wrap support around the frontline communities with local, regional, and international funding. So we want to provide cover to those frontline communities that are working so hard and are exposed. We want to exert pressure at every level of government. The second part of our approach is we want to support the resistance, but also solutions. So where we can expose who's benefiting from industrial forms of development, multinationals, local elites. We also want to arm activists with information about solutions that are working, good forms of sustainable development, and we try to fund those so that people have a good model to talk to. So I'm going to give two examples that express this approach. Both are in the DRC. A lot of our human rights funding is in the Congo. The first example is Virunga, all the way on the eastern side of the country. The second example is around Inga Dam, which we'll also talk about resistance to dams, and that's on the western side of the country. So the first example, Virunga National Park, it's an extraordinary place. It's the second oldest national park in the world. It's the first oldest national park in Africa. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. 4 million people live near or outside the boundary of the park. And most distressingly, the capital of Congo, Kinshasa, allowed licenses for exploration for oil within the park. And that was going to possibly destroy 77% of the park. So the Virunga Alliance within the park created a campaign that started at the local level. So they, two activists featured here, Bantu and Josue, are organizing local fishermen and communities around the park to resist the oil exploration and try to promote a better form of development. And then internationally, the campaign created the documentary Virunga, which was nominated for an Oscar in 2014 or 15. There's also lawsuits in the UK government that are trying to stop Soco from claiming those licenses. And the documentary was widely acclaimed. It was a huge step in the fight for the campaign. And then the outcomes were, 4 months after the documentary got released, Soco pulled out of the park. So that was a huge victory. And then most importantly, it cracked open a space for a new form of development. So the park is creating micro hydro dams and a smart grid technology that's going to actually bring electricity to the local communities and start businesses. So that's what we want to see, the resistance and the solution side by side. Our second example is Inga Dam, all the way on the western side of the country. There's 2 dams currently in operation, and this is the site of the Congo River that we visited a couple of years ago. Those dams are run at about 30 to 40% capacity, so they don't even generate for the full capacity that was promised. There's 5 more dams that are planned for that site at billions of dollars in cost. And the context for Africa, everybody's familiar with this. The gray shaded countries have less than 30% access to energy for their communities. Congo's at less than 9%. This dam, the energy's already promised to South Africa, half of it, another 25% to the mining sector, and if anything's left, it goes to Kinshasa. Nothing's gonna be left, nobody's gonna get energy. So we've been funding a group called a DEV that locally organizes communities that already have been displaced by the first dam, and that picture on the left shows the community. They don't have energy, of course. They've been displaced by a dam, but they don't have electricity. And then on the right is a community meeting, but she's holding a petition of 5,000 community members that have signed to protest the dam. We've been able to provide funding to a DEV to connect them to groups in the capital in Kinshasa called CORAP, that have a coalition to create a strategy on better forms of development and resisting the dam. So it doesn't sound like important support, but a DEV can't really get to those meetings without funder support. On the international level, we've been supporting International Rivers, which is based in Oakland, and they've been writing incredible reports about the ecological and environmental damages that the proposed dams will create. And then Resource Matters and Congo Research Group are looking at the supply chain and corruption and political patronage. So the outcomes for that so far, the World Bank pulled their funding for the dam in 2016, which is huge. Unfortunately, there's still proposals sloshing around the world. I think Spain and China both have proposals for the dam. But this is giving time for the campaign and the coalition to strengthen and really sharpen their tactics. So bring it on. What's next for us? We're going to start naming names. Yeah, this report, 5 Western donors share a pro-corporate agenda for African agriculture. Yeah, we're going after the big guys. We're going to expand our program-related investments. We're going to look at that nexus between renewables and mining, which is going to cause a whole bunch of headaches for everybody. And then we want to find more allies like yourselves. Thank you.